Let's take a look at another example of going from a sketch to a vectorized logo in Illustrator. Again, we're going to use the pen tool, but I will show you an alternate method of building. Again, I just have a clean document set up for print. That's CMYK at 300. I'm using a letter landscape. I'm not going to turn on my grid or snap to grid for this example. I really don't need it. First, I need to get my sketch in here. I'm going to go to File, Place. I'm going to navigate to the PDF that is addressed in the description of this video for the image file if you would like to follow along. In the Place dialog here, I'm going to ensure that my Show Import Options is checked so that I can choose the page of the PDF that I want to use. For this example, we're going to use page 2. I'm going to hit OK. Again, I'm going to see a thumbnail of the image that is going to be placed here on my artboard. I'm just going to click on the artboard, let it come in full size as the image is. I'm going to go ahead and align that to my artboard. Again, with one thing selected, make sure I'm on Align to Artboard up here in the taskbar, and just center with the alignment tools. In my Layers palette, over here on the right hand side, I'm going to change the name of this layer to Sketch. I'm going to lock this layer, put a new layer on top. By default, always drops on top of the active layer, just much as it does in Photoshop. This is going to be my art or logo layer. It really doesn't matter. Let's zoom in a bit here so we can see what we're going to work on. That's one step too far for me. Let me move this up here a little bit. Now, I did this both ways with using line segments and arcs, and also with the pen tool. And the pen tool, I know it's a little harder to get a handle on, but it's about 4 times faster. It took me about 20 minutes to build this with pieces and about 3 to build it with the pen tool. Let me show you the long way for just one part of it, and then we'll finish it off with the pen tool. So underneath the line segment tool here in the toolbar, it's about 7 down or so. If you click and hold, there is the arc tool. I'm going to grab that. It's going to show me a crosshair, and how this works is you click where you want to start the arc and drag to where you want the arc to end. What I'm going to make right here is this top left-hand arc on this giant fold in the back. Okay, so right now it's showing the arc. What I need to do now is actually adjust the arc. So I'm going to go to my direct selection tool so that I can address anchor points. I'm going to click on one of the anchor points for the arc, and you can see what that does is it brings up my handlebars for my anchor points so that I can address my curve the way that I want, and that looks pretty good. If I go back to my selection tool now, drag back into this arc, I'm going to, in my swatches palette, just put some color on that so that you can see what we have here. Okay, so that's number 1. Go back to the arc tool. I'm going to start not quite on the end of that first one, but pretty close. I'm going to adjust that in a minute. I'm going to go over to just about the end on the other side. Back to my direct selection tool. And what I want to do now, I'm going to drag this point down and out of the way a little bit so that you can see what I'm going to do here. By default, and you can double check this, under View, near the bottom underneath your grid stuff is Snap to Point. By default, that should be checked and active. If it's not, go ahead and click on it. Mine is good to go, so I'm going to leave it. Now when I hover over this anchor point, you'll notice that it shows a hollow square next to and underneath my pointer. If I click and drag now, my cursor turns to a solid black arrow with no tail, and when I get directly over another anchor point, my cursor turns white. That is where I want to let go, because I want those points directly on each other. I'm going to do the same thing over here on the right hand side, and I'm going to zoom way in so you can see it again. So my anchor point's right here. When I'm directly on it, it highlights the anchor point. It shows the white square indicator to the bottom and right of my pointer. I'm going to click and drag. Pointer turns black. And when I get directly over the anchor point at the end of this segment here, my pointer turns white, and that's where I let go. Now, I can drag a selection around both of these anchor points and then join them, because we always want to make sure we're drawing solid shapes. And to join them, Object, Path, Join. Alright, I want to do the same thing on the other side so that I'm completing my shape. Those are my last 2 points. Keyboard shortcut for this is Control J or Command J if you're on a Mac. And now if I zoom out a bit here, get us back to center, back to my selection tool, and I select this shape, you can see it's one solid shape. I can give it a little different stroke color and give it a fill color, and that's where you can really see it's one solid shape. Okay, that kind of takes a minute, and like I said, it's a long way. So we're going to complete this out with the pen tool. These are pretty soft curves without a whole lot of manipulation and clicking, so if you can follow along, you should be able to get this one pretty easily, and it should really help with your pen tool drawing skills. So I grab my pen tool, that's P on the keyboard. I'm going to start up here in the upper right hand corner of this shape in the back, and we just want to complete this panel that's right here to the right of our gumdrop in the back. Okay, so I'm going to start just by clicking and letting go. I'm going to come down to loosely where the bottom right hand corner of that shape would be, and I'm going to click and drag and pull out my curve so that it matches the sketch underneath there. Now I'm going to let this go ahead and fold kind of out underneath. It's going to be behind the shape that we draw in the front anyway. I'm going to come to loosely where the other corner should be, not quite on top of my other shape. I'm going to click and let go. I'm going to come up to where the top should be, which is going to be right on top of this other curve. And I'm going to click and drag until I get to where this curve follows the shape of our gumdrop on the left, but overlaps it. And then I'm going to let go, and that's going to make that curve. Now, I need to go straight back across the top to close this shape. So with my pointer still here directly on top of this handlebar, right now I'm clicking nothing. I'm going to hold down Alt, and you'll notice my pointer turns into a caret. This is going to break my handlebars and allow me to drag this handlebar back the other direction 180 degrees. I'm going to put it right on the straight line in the direction that I want to draw. I'm going to let go of everything, the mouse and the keyboard, and now you can see I'm drawing in the opposite direction the way I want to go without a big giant arc over on this side. And now I can go back and close. Notice the little circle to the bottom right hand corner of the pointer, and click, and now I have a closed shape right there. Go back to my selection tool, that's V on the keyboard, and here you can see the shape that we've drawn. Now I'm going to put this, I can actually align the points. Again, nothing selected. I hover over the corner. You can see that white square to the bottom right of my cursor. If I click and drag from there, I know I'm directly on that anchor point, and I can drag this corner down to the corner of our gumball shape here, and I get a white cursor when I'm directly over that anchor point, and that's where I'm going to let go. Now, looking at this upper right hand corner here, there's this little bit of overlap, and I want to go ahead and take care of that before I move on. So I'm going to grab my direct selection tool, my white arrow. I'm going to click here in the center of my big shape in the front just to activate it. Now I can see all the anchor points. At this point, all of the anchor points are selected. They are all filled solid. If I just click once and let go on this anchor point that I want to move, you'll notice that the other anchor points turn white. They are no longer selected. This will allow me to click and drag and just move this down a little so that the strokes line up a little better. Okay, I'm going to go back to my selection tool V on the keyboard. I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and I'm going to grab both of these guys and move them out of the way so that we can concentrate on this shape in the front over here. Again, I'm going to go back to the pen tool, that's P on the keyboard, and I'm going to draw these two distinct shapes here. I'm going to start in this far right hand corner and just click and move. And I'm going to go to the center of this top arc, and I'm going to click and drag to pull out my curve. I'm going to complete this down all the way down to the farthest corner. I'm going to click and drag to adjust out my curve again. And then directly still on that handlebar, I can move and start drawing, but I don't want my arc quite that big. So I'm actually going to break this handlebar. Alt on the keyboard, the indicator turns into the caret, and then I can click and drag on this handlebar. I'm going to move it so that it's pointing in the direction that I'm going to draw, and I'm going to pull it in a bit because it doesn't need to be quite so huge. I'm going to let go of the mouse and the keyboard, and now you can see I'm drawing in the direction I want to go. I'm going to come to the middle of the next curve I want to make. I'm going to pull out my curve to adjust, and then knowing how this shape goes underneath, go ahead and so you can see, we can come over here to the bottom of the toolbar. With the fill addressed, you can hit none, and then that way you can see what you're drawing. I actually want to put in this kind of subtle looping to the curve on the way up. So that's just a click and drag. And then I'm just going to move over to hover over where I started. I see the circle next to my pointer. Click, and that closes my shape. Now if I go to my direct selection tool, that'll allow me to fine-tune this a little bit. I want to pull this handlebar, there we go, a little more like an S, so kind of up and down a bit. And then this bottom point down here just needs the handlebar pulled out a bit just to kind of round out that corner. Okay, I'm going to click off onto the artboard just to deselect. I'm going to go back to my pen tool, or P on the keyboard. I'm going to start here in the bottom right hand corner just by clicking and letting go. I'm going to come up inside of the shape that we drew first, pull out my curve to make sure that it completes that corner underneath me, And then I'm just going to come down to where I think that shape sort of completes, make myself a corner, and then again I'm going to put a little kind of S in here just by clicking and dragging out just a little bit. Okay, and that's our shapes, and that was pretty painless. Let's make the one in front oranges, and we'll do light on top, dark for the outline. We'll address the strokes at the end. Okay, for this shape, which is actually behind and in shadow, I'm going to use the same colors. So I'm going to grab my eyedropper tool, and with that blue outline selected of our shape that we drew last, which is going to be in the back, I'm going to click on this other orange shape, and then I'm going to come over here to the bottom of the toolbar, and next to the swap and stroke and fill indicator is a swap stroke and fill. It's the rounded double-headed arrow. I'm going to click on that, and it's going to swap my colors for me. Since that's in the back, it should be in shadow. Now this piece needs to be behind the other orange piece, so with it selected we go to Object, Arrange, Send to Back, and now those guys look pretty good. I'm going to zoom out just the slightest bit. I'm going to go back and grab my blue, and they kind of sort of look purple now. Shapes, and bring those up. And what I just noticed when I was doing that was we're missing the giant curve on the inside. So I can grab my direct selection tool or the white arrow, and then I can just easily address these handlebars to the bottom and complete that shape the way it was originally intended. Okay. I'm going to change these colors just a bit. I do want a darker blue on the inside and a much lighter blue for the stroke. I'm going to select the other one, go back to my eyedropper, sample those colors, and then go back to my stroke and fill swap. It's also Shift X on the keyboard, and swap those. And that is our shape. Couple last things, touch-ups, fine-tuning that we can do with this. I'm going to zoom in just a little. I'm going to open my stroke palette, turn my stroke up to 2, and again, I'm going to round, cap, and corner these just to soften it up a little bit. And if I go to my layers palette, I can turn off my sketch. Now, if I turn this art off for a second, if you look at the original sketch, there's some sort of cross-hatching in there for shading. I'm not going to shade out the whole thing, but I will show you how to do one specific piece. We're going to do this one right here, I think in the front. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that off because I know what I want the cross-hatching to look like. Just turn on my art. I'm going to zoom out just a little, give myself a little room to work here. So, using line segments, I'm just going to draw myself, click and drag, hold shift, I'm going straight down, and then it'll give me a single line segment. Now, I do want to make sure that these are the correct color. So in my swatches palette, I know that this is this medium orange. Since I'm going to be working on this guy right here, as far as shading, I want that color stroke for my cross-hatching. Alright, now I'm going to select this line segment. I'm going to Alt drag about 4 or 5 copies. Actually, it's better to err when you're doing this on the side of more. So I have probably almost 10 of them. Alright, I'm going to drag over all of those to select all of them. I'm going to go up to my alignment tools. Actually, you can do it in the taskbar, or I'm going to go ahead and open my align palette over here on the right hand side because it's closer to my mouse. Going to change the alignment to align to selection, and then I'm going to hit center horizontal, and then under this distribute spacing I'm going to horizontal distribute these. Alright, I'm going to move this up a little. I'm going to drag a copy of this whole thing while I have it selected. If you want to get really tricky with this and give it a little depth, you can select just the edges. I've got 2 from each side here. And just move the ones on top up and the ones on the bottom down. Alright, so these are going to be my cross marks. If I was going to do the whole thing, I would drag myself a copy off to the side so that I had it to use for the other shapes moving forward, and then I'm going to use this one for the active one that I'm going to do now. Okay, so these are arranged pretty well. They just need to be angled the correct way. So with all of them selected that I'm going to use, I'm going to hover outside of the bounding box in the corner. I get the rounded double-headed arrow that allows me to freehand drag to rotate on the artboard, and a little bit farther, I think. That looks about right. I'm going to select the shape that we want to have this cross hatching in. I'm going to alt drag a copy over here and place it how I want the shading to appear inside of it. And I think it goes something like that. Now, right now, the copy of this shape is behind all of these line segments. We actually need it in front. So we're going to go to Object, Arrange, Bring to Front. And then I'm going to drag a selection that is all of the line segments and the shape on top. I'm going to use that shape on top as a clipping mask so that we only see the interior portions of those strokes. So Object, Clipping Mask, Make. And now you can see we have our cross-hatching strokes in there. Because we're putting the same shape back over the top, I can actually use one of the corner points to align it. And that goes on top, and that creates our cross-hatching. Again, if I wanted to finish that out, I would just continue doing the same process using these line segments over here, arranging. You can change the weight of the stroke a little bit, obviously change the color for the blue ones. It would be nice if the ones inside and the back were the lighter color and the ones on top were the darker